Hi, my name is Stéphane Reynaud, and today we'll be talking about getting a good build with SciTools Understand using the C++ Strict Parser. This applies to C code and C++ code. Again, if you have any extra question after watching the video, reach out to me to any of those email addresses. So you are probably here because you're trying to set up a SciTools Understand project and set it right. And you first started, you open the tool and you get this page, which is the wizard to set a project. For now, I want you to forget about this. I want you to forget about the GUI. We need to understand a lot of different concepts that will be important in getting your project right. And this is done by understanding the pipeline of Understand. Basically meaning understanding how files are processed, read and parsed by Understand to get an analysis. So when you set up a project in Understand, the first thing you'll do is import files. There's many ways to do it, but think of it as bringing files that need to be analyzed. And those files will be of two sorts. They will be project source files, basically the C and the CPP, as well as a header file. And you may or may not include the header file. We'll talk about that later. But those will be your project files. And SciTools Understand is going to go and have a pipeline that processes all those files and feeds them to the parser. But in order to do that accurately, it will need to find some extra information. So Understand will first start by finding all the source files in your code. It's not going to touch the header file, the source files only. And then it's going to do one by one do the following. It's going to look for the includes that files need. And by include here, we mean the includes that are between quotes. And then it's going to look for the system include this files is using. And we are going to talk here about the includes that are between less than and more than. And finally, it's going to find the macros. So you need to feed information to Understand where to find include, system include, and macros. How do you do that? Well, there is many places in Understand when you can do it. The first one is that you will have an option to set up the C++ include for the whole project. The second thing you will be able to do is to set it up file by file by using what we call override settings for the file. You can set up the include directory for each file separately. And a third option you have to find includes is to actually look for them within the project files themselves. So if you select that option, whenever you look for an include, you are going to look, does it exist in the project files? About the system include, it's pretty similar. We'll have the option to set up C++ system include at the project level and also file by files. You will be able to override for each files. Macro, same thing. You'll be able to set up the macros definition for the whole project, and you'll also have the ability to override those settings for each file. Another thing that's going to affect the system include and the macros is which compiler architecture vendor you will set in the GUI. We are not relying on the compiler, but if you set those options, this may set up some system include and some macros that you don't see, but that are defined usually by your compiler. So this will be the way. This is how you can set up all the information about where to find include, where to find system include, and where to find macros in the system. One last thing to consider is that when you find those includes, or those system include, or those macros, things may happen. For instance, when you find an include, you will have the option to say, hey, I found this include, I want to put it in the project file automatically. So you will be able to set that up so that every include you find is fed back into the project files. So best use case for this is that way you can have all the files that you need counted in your project files. For instance, how many files is my project? Well, you probably want to count all the header you actually use. Similarly, you can do the same for the system include, which is bringing all the system include you use in the project file. I usually use that to debug my project to make sure I'm analyzing in the right place. And finally, this is like all you can do on those include and everything, how the source file are processed. But there is one last option which allow you to analyze header files as if they were source code. So analyze a header file even if it's not included by any source file. That will be useful for a library such as Boost, which is only header, but usually it's a bad idea to do unless you really know that this is something that is required. So here is a summary of everything. So before I show you where you can set all those things in the GUI, I want to present you with a few scenarios on typical scenarios on how you will set up a project, for instance. Let's say your goal is just to do a quick and dirty analysis. You have code, you really just want to have the best things in 5 minutes. So the easiest way to do that is to put all your source files and all your header file into the project file, and then just not set anything, just tell that you want to search for include file in the project file, and just set up the right compiler that you have. So Understand is going to go about the best it can do for you without you setting anything. Not always the best, but if your goal is just to get a 5-minute analysis, or even if you are missing some file, this may be a good way to do it. I actually recommend switching to the fuzzy parser if you do this, and not use the strict parser. Second, if you want a complete and accurate analysis, so my approach in general is to only import source file at that point. Do not put any header in your project file, and then set up your C++ include, your C++ system include, your C++ macros, everything correctly, and set up the right compiler. And the last thing you do is whenever you find an include, add it back to the project files. That way, whenever the analysis is done, you'll have a set of project files that will be actually all the file you need, and everything will be analyzed correctly with your error. And this is pretty similar to how an imported analysis works. Imported analysis means that in SciTools Understand, you can import compile command.json, Visual Studio project, some project from your favorite development tools. Well, when you do this, the include or the import will only bring the source file to your project. So similarly, you will not have to set up anything. The only thing you really want to do is you will need to set up the add found include file to source list to make sure that again, same thing, we're going to find that H file and they're going to be fed in your project files. Understand, when you import the file, we'll actually set up all the C++ override include for you because it is part of that configuration file you are imported. But you will still remain in charge of setting up the C++ system include. That will be the one thing you may have to set up if you don't really have the compiler on the same machine or something. And then I forgot to say, the C++ override macros will always be set, also be set by import. Basically what the import does is just it brings a source file, it brings all the -i and the -d that it needs from that file, it sets them up in the override setting of your project, and the only thing you have to do is set up the compiler, set up the C++ system include if needed, and then please select the add found include files to source list. That way all your .h file will be bringing. Last but not least, where can I find all this in the GUI? That's what you have been waiting for. Well, guess what? It's fairly simple. I'll go one by one and I'll show you where those things are. So the C++ include, it's simple. You go to project, project settings, and then you select in this window C++ include, and you can set up the include here. For the C++ override include, again, you go project, project settings, you will select files here, and then for each file you can right click and hit configure override setting. You will find the settings there. For the search for include file amount project files, it's simple. It is under project, project settings. Last time I said project, project settings because everything is in project, project settings. And then you go C++ include and the option will be located here. For the C++ system include, it's under C++ include, system include, and you can set them up here. For the C++ override system include, well, same thing. You pick your file, you right click, and you would configure override settings. The C++ macros under C++ macros, the C++ override macros, there is a trend here. Pick your file, right click, configure override settings, and you'll find it in there. The compiler architecture vendor OS, it is under C++ options. You will actually be able to select it here. Note that sometimes the language standard as well can be important. And here you have the strict versus fuzzy. Specifically here, we're talking about strict. The fuzzy parser, I may do another video about it. It's really only if you want to do quick and dirty analysis. The add found include source to file list under C++ include. You can actually set it here. The add found system include, it is just under the add found system include, just right there. Analyze the header in isolation, same thing, it is here. It is only available in the C++ strict, so if you are in fuzzy, you won't see that option. And then, that's basically it. So you may want to do that through the command line. That will be the topic for another video, but I hope you learned today how to do and to set up a good project is Understand. I will make another video about the wizard and we'll discuss that in more details. Well, thank you for listening today. I'll see you later.